Good evening, South Elementary students. Welcome to our next edition of Bedtime Stories with Principal Puzio. We are going to read the next part of The Mirror of Irised tonight. So we stopped off with Malfoy not being so kind to Harry for wanting to or needing to stay at Hogwarts for the winter holidays, but Harry's very happy to stay at Hogwarts and not to go back to Privet Drive. But before they leave, Harry and Ron and Hermione are still working to solve the mystery as to who Nicholas Flamel is. And so they are in the library, and Harry's realizing that he would need like a written note from a teacher to get into the restricted section. "What are you looking for there, boy?" "Nothing," said Harry. Madam Pince, the librarian, brandished a feather duster at him. "You'd better get out of here then. Go on, out." Wishing that he had been a bit quicker at thinking up some story, Harry left the library. He, Ron, and Hermione had already agreed they'd better not ask Madam Pince where they could find Flamel. They were sure that she would be able to tell them, but they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. Harry waited outside in the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but he wasn't very hopeful. They had been looking for a fortnight after all, but as they only had odd moments between lessons, it wasn't surprising that they had found nothing. What they really needed was a nice long search without Madam Pince breathing down their necks. 5 minutes later, Ron and Hermione joined him, shaking their heads. They went off to lunch. "You will keep looking while I'm away, won't you?" said Hermione. "And send me an owl if you find anything." "And you could ask your parents if they know who Flamel is," said Ron. "It would be safe to ask them." "Very safe, as they're both dentists," said Hermione. Boys and girls, do you think that Muggle dentists would have any idea who Nicholas Flamel is? I don't think so either. Once the holidays had started, Ron and Harry were having too good a time to think much about Nicholas Flamel. They had the dormitory to themselves, and the common room was far emptier than usual, so they were able to get to the good armchairs by the fire. They sat by the hour eating anything they could spear on a toasting fork, bread, crumpets, marshmallows, and plotting ways of getting Malfoy expelled, which were fun to talk about, even if they wouldn't work. Ron also started teaching Harry wizard chess. This was exactly like Muggle chess, except that the figures were alive, which made it a lot like directing troops in battle. Ron's set was very old and battered, like everything else that Ron owned. It had once belonged to someone else in the family, in this case, his grandfather. However, old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well, he never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. And boys and girls, there's just a little picture right here in the corner of what the wizard chess pieces looked like. Harry played with chessmen that Seamus Finnegan had lent him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player yet, and they kept shouting different bits of advice at him, which was confusing. "Don't send me there. Can't you see his knight? Send him. We can afford to lose him." On Christmas Eve, Harry went to bed looking forward to the next day for the food and the fun, but not expecting any presents at all. When he woke early next morning, however, the first thing he saw was a small pile of packages at the foot of his bed. "Happy Christmas," said Ron sleepily, as Harry scrambled out of bed and pulled on his dressing gown. "You too," said Harry. "Will you look at this? I've got some presents." "Well, what did you expect? Turnips?" said Ron, turning to his own pile, which was a lot bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top parcel. It was wrapped in thick brown paper, and scrawled across it was, "To Harry, from Hagrid." Inside was a roughly cut wooden flute. Hagrid had obviously whittled it himself. Harry blew it, and it sounded a bit like an owl. A second very small parcel contained a note. "We received your message and enclose your Christmas present. From Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia." Sellotaped to the note was a 50-pence piece. "Well, that's friendly," said Harry. Ron was fascinated by the 50 pence. "Weird," he said. "What a shape! This is money?" "You can keep it," said Harry, laughing at how pleased Ron was. "Hagrid and my aunt and uncle." "Well, so then who sent these?" "I think I know who that one's from," said Ron, going a bit pink and pointing to a very lumpy parcel. "My mum. I told her you didn't expect any presents, and—" "Oh, no," he groaned. "She's made you a Weasley jumper." Harry had torn open the parcel to find a thick, hand-knitted sweater in emerald green and a large box of homemade fudge. "Every year she makes us a jumper," said Ron, unwrapping his own, "and mine's always maroon." "Well, that's really nice of her," said Harry, trying the fudge, which was very tasty. His next present also contained sweets. It was a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. This left only one parcel. Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering to the floor, where it lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. "I've heard of those," he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of every flavor beans he's got from Hermione. "If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable." "What is it?" Harry picked the shining, silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to the touch, like water woven into material. "It's an invisibility cloak," said Ron, a look of awe on his face. "I'm sure it is. Try it on." Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders and Ron gave a yell. "It is! Look down!" Harry looked down at his feet, but they had gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in mid-air, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head and his reflection vanished completely. "There's a note," said Ron suddenly. "A note fell out of it." Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter. Written in narrow, loopy writing he had never seen before were the following words: "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you." There was no signature. Harry stared at the note. Ron was admiring the cloak. "I'd give anything for one of these," he said. "Anything. Well, what's the matter?" "Nothing," said Harry. He felt very strange, though. Who had sent the cloak? Had it really once belonged to his father? Before he could say or think anything else, the dormitory door was flung open and Fred and George Weasley bounded in. Harry stuffed the cloak quickly out of sight. He didn't feel like sharing it with anyone else yet. "Merry Christmas!" "Hey, look! Harry's got a Weasley jumper, too!" Fred and George were wearing blue jumpers, one with a large yellow F on it, the other with a large yellow G. "Harry's is better than ours, though," said Fred, holding up Harry's jumper. "She obviously makes more of an effort, if you're not family." "Why aren't you wearing yours, Ron?" George demanded. "Come on, get it on. They're lovely and warm." "I hate maroon," Ron moaned half-heartedly as he pulled it over his head. "You haven't got a letter on yours," George observed. "I suppose she thinks you don't forget your name. But we're not stupid. We know. We're called Gred and Forge." "What's all this noise?" Percy Weasley stuck his head through the door, looking disapproving. He had clearly come halfway through unwrapping his presents, too, as he carried a lumpy jumper over his arm, which Fred seized. "P for Prefect. Get it on, Percy. Come on, we're all wearing ours. Even Harry got one." "I don't want," said Percy thickly as the twins forced the jumper over his head, knocking his glasses askew. "And you're not sitting with the prefects today either," said George. "Christmas time is a time for family." They frog-marched Percy from the room, his arms pinned to his sides by his jumper. Harry had never, in all his life, had such a Christmas dinner. 100 fat roast turkeys, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, platters of fat chipolatas, tureens of buttered peas, silver boats of thick, rich gravy and cranberry sauce, and stacks of wizard crackers every few feet along the table. These fantastic crackers were nothing like the feeble muggle ones that Dursleys usually bought, with their little plastic toys and their flimsy paper hats. Harry pulled a wizard cracker with Fred, and it didn't just bang, it went off with a blast like a cannon and engulfed them all in a cloud of blue smoke, while from this inside exploded a rear admiral's hat and several live white mice. Up on the high table, Dumbledore had swapped his pointed wizard's hat for a flowered bonnet and was chuckling merrily at a joke Professor Flitwick had just read him. Flaming Christmas puddings followed the turkey. Percy nearly broke his teeth on a silver sickle embedded in his slice. Harry watched Hagrid getting redder and redder in the face as he called for more wine, finally kissing Professor McGonagall on the cheek who, to Harry's amazement, giggled and blushed, her top hat lopsided. When Harry finally left the table, he was laden down with a stack of things out of the crackers, including a pack of non-explodable luminous balloons, a grow-your-own warts kit, and his own new wizard chess set. The white mice had disappeared, and Harry had a nasty feeling that they were going to end up as Mrs. Norris's Christmas dinner. Harry and the Weasleys spent a happy afternoon having a furious snowball fight in the grounds. Then, cold, wet, and gasping for breath, they returned to the fire in the Gryffindor common room, where Harry broke in his new chess set by losing spectacularly to Ron. He suspected he wouldn't have lost so badly if Percy hadn't tried to help him so much. After a tea of turkey sandwiches, crumpets, trifle, and a Christmas cake, everyone felt too full and too sleepy to do much more before bed except sit and watch Percy chase Fred and George all over Griffin Tower because they had stolen his prefect badge. It had been Harry's best Christmas day ever. Yet something had been nagging him at the back of his mind all day. Not until he climbed into his bed was he free to think about it, the invisibility cloak, and whoever had sent it. Ron, full of turkey and cake, and with nothing mysterious to bother him, fell asleep almost as soon as he'd drawn the curtains of his four-poster. Harry leant over the side of his own bed and pulled the cloak out from under it. His father's? This had been his father's. He let the material flow over his hands, smoother than silk, light as air. Use it well, the note had said. He had to try it. Now. He slipped out of bed and wrapped the cloak around himself, looking down at his legs. He saw only moonlight and shadows. It was a very funny feeling. Use it well. Suddenly, Harry felt wide awake. The whole of Hogwarts was open to him in this cloak. Excitement flooded through him as he stood there in the dark and in the silence. He could go anywhere in this, anywhere, and Filch would never know. Ron grunted in his sleep. Should Harry wake him? Something held him back. His father's cloak. He felt that this time, the first time, he wanted to use it alone. He crept out of the dormitory, down the stairs, across the common room, and climbed through the portrait hole. "Who's there?" squawked the fat lady. Harry said nothing. He walked quickly down the corridor. And boys and girls, I think we will stop there for tonight, and we will finish the Mirror of Erised the next time I see you. Have a wonderful evening, and continue to work hard on your remote learning studies and all of your work for your teachers, and we will see you soon. Sweet dreams.